Hi, poetry lovers. Welcome. I am going to try my best not to use my YouTuber voice, but it is something that our children watch a lot of. So, what's up, fam? Thank you for joining me on this live poetry corner. I feel like I've only done this maybe 2 or 3 times before, and I'm hoping that it won't be boring or feel too much like school. So, with that, uh, if we could officially go to the poetry corner.
Dun, 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 dun. Hey, baby, I hear the poetry.
Even got a little bit of my laugh there at the end. I almost made Griffin stick around just to do that, but luckily Amanda had already clipped it for me because it's not really the poetry corner unless we hear that song. I am here for the MaxFunDrive. I'm sure that you have been watching the streams like I have and hearing all about it. We are working really hard to make sure that anybody that listens or enjoys content on the Max Fun Network knows that it is definitely time to donate. And I would encourage you all, if you have done it today or during the stream, to post it in the chat. We are really hoping that all of this time on screen is making a difference and that you guys are enjoying it. So I wanted to start by introducing our poet. I have one poet that I researched and plan to share out today, and that poet is named James Galvin. James Galvin is considered kind of one of the great poets of the American West, and not somebody I was particularly familiar with until I started researching. I think I'm generally just kind of intimidated by the American West because I've spent almost no time out there. Those of you that have kind of grown up in the Midwest may know, like, it's very rare that you end up making your way west. Obviously, I lived in Texas for a very long time, but kind of anything above or west of Texas is pretty unfamiliar. James Galvin was raised in northern Colorado, and he has a home in Wyoming. And a lot of his poetry is kind of about that experience in addition to his experience in Iowa. So James Galvin, like a lot of famous poets, has connections to the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is kind of like the destination for MFAs in creative writing. I read an article that said that the Iowa Writers Workshop is to creative writers what Harvard Law School is to the Supreme Court, and that, like, that is the experience that a lot of people are kind of striving to get to. And he ended up teaching there from 1984 to 2023. So I saw him give a lot of interviews saying, like, as a writer, there's nothing more inspiring than to be around a bunch of writers, particularly writers who've been kind of recognized for their enthusiasm and talent. So yeah, he is currently professor emeritus as of 2023, which is very recent that he stepped back from what I imagine was a full teaching load. So his collections of poetry go all the way back to 1980. The book that I kind of pulled from is this one, which is a collection of his poems from 1975 to 1997. So it's not comprehensive, but it's a significant number. So I'll go ahead and get started reading one from his first book, Imaginary Timber, which came out in 1980. And the poem is called News. These afternoons seem to occur more in geologic time than in one's life. Under the blue, fresh snowfall, sandstone outcrops generate heat. I count 15 kinds of tracks, like runes and nothing living. Drifted snow, an ethered gauze, muffles the land, creaks under my skis, animals sleep among the roots, without doors, without dreams. 7 miles for a phone, and even the wires have gone under. Another day knowing nothing more than when I last saw you. That stainless steel shadow vigilant over your bed. It followed you down the hospital halls, arms hung with surgical fruit. I slide down the last drift to the house, slap my skis together. A small avalanche, shaped like a continent, drifts off the roof and falls into a heap, and some chinking falls from the eaves. We each inhabit our own small flesh, our tract. Each tries to keep his own doors from creaking like news as each night slams shut and each dawn opens like a sudden flow of blood from the mouth. That's news. And it kind of speaks to what I was talking about of like he grew up in this like kind of very rural environment. He writes a lot kind of about nature, particularly in his earliest books of poetry. And you really get a sense of kind of what his experience was. Um, so I mentioned he grew up in northern Colorado. And I read an interview that he did with the University of Iowa. And they talked about how he did everything from alpine, rock, and ice climbing to construction and ranch work. And then he apparently apprenticed to be a luthier, which is a craftsperson who builds, repairs, and restores stringed musical instruments. Just not a word that I'd ever heard before. But in the interview, he says, quote, "If you were a boy raised in post-World War II mountain Western America, all you were expected to do was hunt and ride horses and be tough. You could go your whole youth and adolescence, and no one was ever going to ask you to express yourself creatively. No one was ever going to ask you to write a poem or paint." Uh, and then he goes on to speak about how he kind of experimented with making things until he ended up becoming a poet. So he spent some time doing photography. He took a lot of art classes and art history classes. Uh, and he said, quote, "I got to where I could sort of draw, but I was really not very good. Late in my college career, I decided to write poetry, and I was better at that than I was at drawing," which I personally really related to. In that I feel like, particularly as a young person, you're just kind of trying to find the thing that other people seem to like and that you feel good at. And sometimes it's not the first thing or the thing that maybe you'd want to be good at. And so I just found that like really realistic and relatable of just like, hey, there were a lot of things I wanted to do, and poetry seemed to be the thing that worked the best or came the easiest. So he went on to write 7 more books of poems. And my plan is to just kind of hop around a little bit and read some of those poems. Some of them coming from that, anthology that I mentioned earlier. Gosh, I need to learn how to beauty blog. Not that this is necessary, but it feels like I should be doing this too. Anyway. So, I mentioned, luthier, or I can't imagine, or luthier. I had to do a lot of looking things up, to, understand what was happening in a lot of these poems, because again, I mentioned, like, I didn't come from kind of a rural Western experience. So one of the things that I had to look up was shadow casting. Which those of you on the stream who have experience fly fishing, again, I don't know what the crossover might be. Oh, sorry, I keep losing the focus, and I'm not sure what to do about it. Okay. Thanks, Amanda. So anyway, shadow casting was not anything I was familiar with. I had to look it up. Apparently, it is a fly fishing term It is a highly technical trick designed to prevent spooking the fish by keeping the line above water or casting in shaded areas. So those of you that have seen a river runs through it, apparently that's something that is discussed. Um, I may have seen that, but it's a 1992 movie, and I don't think I've seen it in a very long time. Um, anyway, this poem came out 8 years before that, so maybe it inspired the whole film. I really don't know. And so anyway, the poem is called Shadow Casting, and it is from his second book, God's Mistress. Shadow Casting. This boy's father dies. Fine, it always happens. The boy knows what to do. He goes fishing the same stretch of water he angled with his father all his life till now. The beaver ponds shine like a string of pearls. It isn't easy to fly cast a mirror finish. The ponds are silting in. It always happens. They turn into meadows. The stream is choked with sweet-smelling grasses, cottonwoods, and willows. He knows what to do with 50 feet of line out, shadow casting. The loops flash over his head, electric in the sunlight, as if to illustrate grief or the hem of a luminous dress in motion. Then the tapered line rifles out, and the lead wing touches water with no more force than its own tiny weight. The surface breaks. They call them rainbows for a reason. The boy opens his father's clasp knife to open the fish. As he does this, some lint trapped under the blade like a cottonwood seed from his father's pocket falls out and parachutes down to the grass. And suddenly this boy, it always happens, doesn't know what to do anymore. I love that poem so much. It's such a I it's so tricky to write about these big emotions, these big life experiences that are obviously very personal, but also feel very universal. And you're trying to say something that you haven't heard before or that feels true to you. And it's very difficult, I feel like, to do that delicately and in an original way. And I mean, if you've listened to Poetry Corner before, you know I'm like a sucker for like a good last line or two. Like honestly, you could wander all over in the poem, and if you end up somewhere really meaningful, I'm like, that was a good poem. And that's how I feel about that one. I'm reading about fly fishing. I have no idea what's happening. I'm like, the words are familiar to me, and I'm thinking like, okay, he's fishing. I can follow that. And then the experience of opening up his father's knife and finding some lint from his father's pocket in the blade, like, oh God, oh, incredible. So again, a lot of the interviews and quotes I'm gonna cite from James Galvin come from kind of two sources. They come from either the University of Iowa, kind of published interviews in their own press or magazines, or website, and then there's another interview from Orion Magazine, where he kind of goes into detail about his experience with poetry. And one of the things he talks about specific to this book, God's Mistress, is the presence of what he calls the Western landscape in his work. So he says, quote, "I think the Western landscape teaches us things. It's extremely dramatic and it can be extremely violent. Just the weather can be extreme. And so the lives of the people under that sky tend to be dramatic. But the culture is stoical. And so I'd like to think that landscape that I grew up in and the sky I grew up under and the vistas that I grew up trying to assimilate because somehow internalized in me, I would like to have, yes, drama, grandeur, but also an understatement and a stoicism in my work, which I just feel like is exactly what's evident in that poem, Shadow Casting. He doesn't really go into a lot of what he's feeling, or kind of specifics. Um, the poet I talk about on today's episode of Wonderful is Kristen Tracy, and she talks about how poems sometimes come across as riddles, which I felt like was a really apt way to do it. And if you've ever sat down and tried to write a poem, I feel like that is the experience of like, I want to say what I'm trying to say, but I don't want to say it too plainly. I want it to feel artsy. And so then you kind of end up creating what feels like a riddle. Um, uh, and it's really hard to kind of, I don't know, to get at what you're trying to say in a way that feels emotional, but correct. Um, so in an interview, James Galvin said, "Poetry offers itself to us as a way of talking about the things we can't talk about. No one invented it, it was given. The idea is to give yourself over to the language of poetry. Let the language speak for itself. I have always had this feeling that the next poem already exists. It just isn't written yet. You have to wait for the poem to let you write it." This could be a drinking game of the number of times that I read something powerful out loud and then just because I feel like, sometimes I feel like things are said so correctly in a way that feels like, "Oh my gosh, that's yes, that's exactly it." And that was one of those quotes of sometimes you feel like it's there. This thing I'm trying to write is there. I haven't found it yet. Eventually, it will let me write it. And that's kind of a very, relatable thing, particularly as somebody who has tried to do creative writing. Okay. Again, MaximumFun.org/join. I have some more poems I'm planning on reading. We may go a little past 3:30, um, but I really encourage you to join and support the network. And I'm really grateful that you've joined me here today. I feel a little bit like I am teaching a class, but uh, I'm also I don't know any other way to do it, so I'm hoping you're enjoying it. Okay, so I have gotten through 2 books. The next book is Elements, which came out in 1988. Um, in the interview with Orion magazine, specifically, he referenced this book and said, "I think I started to use the natural world as a character in and of itself earlier on, but in a kind of innocent way. I just thought that besides love and death, it was the biggest thing there is. I now think it is bigger. In my first 2 books, the natural world is a character. It has characteristics, it speaks. But it isn't until Elements that things like weather and terrain really act on human emotions and ideas." So this was another poem where I had to look something up, not about fishing, but about snow fences, which again, not familiar with. This is a situation where if I had been potentially in a more rural area of Missouri and not St. Louis, I might be familiar with this concept. I imagine this will be familiar to a lot of you. Snow fences are designed barriers that disrupt wind flow, causing the snow to settle in controlled areas before it reaches roads, driveways, or buildings. So again, he grew up in Colorado, spends a lot of time in Wyoming, Iowa. These are all areas where I'm guessing people have more familiarity with the concept of snow fences, but that was new to me. This again is from the book Elements. The name of the poem is Sentences for a Friend Snowed In. His snow fences are sentences of braille the wind can read, though sometimes it ignores his suggestions. The snow fence is not a fence. It discontinues, contains without surrounding, makes the sound of one hand praying. It holds back the snow by letting it through and holding back the wind. Now that Lyle lives alone, his snow fences are fears that say what he doesn't want to happen. He doesn't want to be overwhelmed. He doesn't want to go down, snow rising past the windows. What if the wind indeed prevails? Spindrift imitates the soul held down, and the snow fence is a wooden spine that dreams. The other hand, inside, tending the fire. Again, what a like picturesque way to like visualize, again, snow fences, new concept to me. I read the poem, I liked it, and then I looked up what snow fences were, and then I liked it more. um, but I feel like to that quote that he gave about the environment and the natural world interacting more with human experience, like, I feel like that's a really good example where he saw this experience of snow and the landscape and how it, like, was representing this experience for, whoever Lyle might be. Um, and, uh, and kind of speaks to, like, a larger sense of trying to kind of protect yourself and control something that can't be controlled. Um, I found that, really powerful. Um, so the thing I haven't mentioned about James Galvin is that he doesn't only write poetry. He has written prose. And what happens next is in 1992, he publishes The Meadow. Now, because this is the poetry corner, I didn't I didn't read The Meadow. I don't I don't have a lot to say about it. But I will say the synopsis I read says that The Meadow, quote, depicts the 100-year history of a meadow in the arid mountains of the Colorado-Wyoming border. Galvin describes the seasons, the weather, the wildlife, and the few people who do not possess but are themselves possessed by this terrain. And then our friend Lyle. For Lyle, Ray, Clara, and App, the struggle to survive on an independent family ranch is a series of blameless failures and unacclaimed successes that illuminate the Western character. This book is apparently incredible. Like apparently it brought a lot of people to his work. Um, when I was reading about it, it gave me like a real Grapes of Wrath kind of vibe, in that you like are learning a lot about the experience of being in a place and how that is kind of impacting these people in that place. So I didn't read it. I can't talk about it, but it seems appropriate, kind of given his own experience. And I love reading the prose of a poet. Um, Margaret Atwood is a great example. She's somebody who has written a lot of poetry. I mean, you may only know her from The Handmaid's Tale. She also wrote Blind Assassin, which is a book that I really like. But she also writes poetry, and I feel like the kind of the skills you pick up in poetry are so useful when you are writing fiction. Yeah, I would recommend, if that sounds like something that is of interest to you. I think I don't know. I think that would probably be a good book. Um, okay. I don't know if I have poems ready from the next book. Let me check. So, no, I think that so the next book is Lethal Frequencies, came out in 1994. Um, and then this book, Resurrection, came out in 1997. Um, and so technically it's interesting. He got a lot of acclaim for his collection of poetry. Um, which, I guess makes sense. But it is kind of funny when it's just a bunch of your books in an anthology and suddenly they're like, this is incredible. And it's like, well, the other books you didn't really didn't seem to notice as much. Um, but the Resurrection Update was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Award, the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, and the Poets Prize. Um, and again, if you've enjoyed the poems, this feels like reading Rainbow, and I knew it was going to get there. I'm happy that I made it this far. But if you've enjoyed the poems so far, they're all in this book, Resurrection Update. I should point out, I don't know this man. I don't know anyone that knows him. I'm not getting commission off of promoting his book. But there's part about the Poetry Corner that feels like a responsibility to, like, you know, promote the work. It's not easy to stumble across poetry at like a airport, bookstore, like you're never like looking for like a beach read and you happen upon like a book of poetry. So I always feel like I need to promote. In 1999, he wrote another prose book called Fencing the Sky. This one sounds kind of like a true crime book. So that, I mean, he's got something for everybody, I guess. The synopsis says, circumstances spiral out of control when an accidental murder springs from the best of intentions. With one man dead and another on the run, this is a story about violence and how it destroys lives when the land is at stake. So again, Fencing the Sky. Poetry's not your thing. One, I don't know why you're watching this, but that might be a good option for you. The next book, and I debated whether or not I was going to share a poem from this book, but I think it's a useful experience for people. He wrote a book called X poems, like the dots to colon, not colon poems. And it's largely about his divorce. So he was married to the poet Jory Graham for like 15 years. They had a child together. Jory Graham, arguably a more famous poet than him. They both taught at Iowa briefly. And this book, X, was kind of largely in response to that divorce. So I wanted to share a poem from that that was published in Poetry Magazine. And it is called Depending on the Wind. One, a score of years ago, I felled 100 pines to build a house. 2 stories, 7 rooms in all. I built my love a home. Our daughter was in orbit in the womb. Mountains spun off like the arm of a galaxy into the emptiness our windows framed. What a view, our friends exclaimed, and sunsets to die for every single night. 2. Vertigo of solitude, distillate of loneliness for blood, my wife untrue, my daughter flown. I, like a widower or worse, move among the rooms I made. Where once I was not alone, now each closed door is panic, and spaces grow immense with memory, like shadows at dusk. Gone that arrangement of allegiances called family we never really know before it ends. Like love itself, it isn't true till then. I have no family now, but remembrances of tiny joys, tinier dramas we used to call our life, like pollen over everything. Brightly colored clothespins on the line, a cross-shaped coral earring whose match is lost, books of fairy tales we read aloud at night. That's embarrassing. I must be dumb as a gunny sack of hammers. Wind still blows through open windows like it always used to do. What did I love that made me believe it would last? Kind of a downer. um, and also difficult. I'm always hesitant, particularly when both of the people in this relationship are well known, to read a poem like I'm taking a side. Um, I don't know the nature of the end of their relationship. I don't know, any details about, when he says that his wife was, quote, "untrue," what he's referencing, but I will say that experience of sharing a space with someone, and then having them be gone, and he's referencing around the same time, the child that he had, with this woman, like, grew up, went to college. So suddenly this house is empty, that he built when she was pregnant. And I just feel like if you have been in a relationship where you've shared a space with someone and that person leaves and you are still in that space, the experience, of the poet is very relatable. Um, and he did actually build a house. I was researching, uh whether or not this was actually something he did or if this was like a metaphorical thing but no, he actually did build a house. He did have experience, I guess, in construction as one of his, careers. So I don't know that he was out there, plank by plank, but um, it's obviously a very authentic experience for him. Um, I know that we are at time. Um, and I will just say he has 2 more, books of poetry after that. So there's As Is that came out in 2009, um, and then Everything We Always Knew Was True, came out in 2016. Um, and I think I will share that last poem, from 2016 just quickly. Because it kind of speaks to the time he's at in his life now. Uh, I He gave an interview with the Los Angeles Review of Books and said, "Nature is inexhaustible as something to think about and to change in relation to, and to complicate how you think about other things. There are also the problems of human nature and the body. We love our bodies, but they always betray us. The ultimate betrayal, of course, is death. Maybe one of the reasons why I can write something and you can read it and pretty much know what I'm talking about is that we're both going to die. We share that, and that's a deep feeling." So this one obviously this book occurred outside of my anthology. So I downloaded it on my Kindle. Um, and the poem I'm going to read is Giving Up the Ghosts. The address book I bought in Italy 30 or so years ago had a blue leather cover. It got to where all that held it together was duct tape and rubber bands. Every time I opened it, friends, dead and alive, fell out together. My address book was deciduous. My address book was a tree full of falling leaves, full of butterflies dead and dying. I bought a new address book, black plastic cover, bound by metal rings, and set about the tedium of transcribing. There were more dead friends than I guessed, and thanked each one for not making me write down their info. And I thanked the ghosts, those names whose people I couldn't remember. Who's that? And I tried to conjure them up, relieved when I couldn't. I got on with work of securing the living. giving them places, phone numbers, imagining each one alive and free. I love that one too. For those of you that don't have an address book, it could be like contacts in your phone. um, but it is a real experience of losing somebody and still having their information and kind of deciding what to do with it. And I think the address book gives you a real tangible way to experience that decision. And I really like that he wrote that poem. James Galvin, uh, still writing, has not, to my knowledge, published anything since 2016. That does not mean it is not coming. And I'm sure there will be another collected version of his work, um, based on kind of the success of the first one. Um, Thank you so much for joining, MaximumFun.org/join. If you have become a member today, thank you so much. If you became a member during this stream, I will consider that a success. Um, and I've really enjoyed being in the poetry corner with you all. This has been an incredible experience. I would love to do this again, and I hope that I will. So thank you so much. MaximumFun.org/join. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported
directly
by you.